Hello, I'm Kimberly Y. Erwin, and this is Race Talks. So today I'd like to introduce Peter Heymann, but I'd love for him to introduce himself to you and why exactly he would like to have an open conversation on race and ethnicity. Peter?
Thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate this invitation to participate. And I'm excited to be on the show with you. I really am. And your topic of your show is just so perfect for our times and perfect for me and what I do. I'll briefly introduce myself. Right now, I'm a career and life coach. I say right now because I've been a lot of things in my life. But for the last 8 years or so, I've been a career and life coach after a 30-year career in sales, marketing, and advertising. And I have been involved or interested in issues of race and racism and social justice in America for really ever since college, which is about 100 years ago. I participated in a program when I was in college called the Urban Semester, where they plunked 8 students in the inner city of Hartford, and we each worked for a different social service agency. And then the professors came to our apartment and related economics and history and sociology to the inner city and race and racism. So that was my first introduction to race and racism. I mean, I identify as a white person. And so I was born to all the privilege that means in America. And so my process has been one of learning, and I'm constantly looking to learn and grow. I've been involved in community organizing to undo racism. I got involved with an organization called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, a wonderful organization that does the Undoing Racism workshops. They've been doing that work for 40 years. I've been involved for about 18 years, and I went through the training, so I'm a trainer for them. I've traveled the country whenever they need a white guy to be part of the multiracial team. They say, Pete, can you go to Houston? Can you go to New York City? Can you go here, there, and everywhere? What an experience. Unbelievable. So I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm committed to social justice and social change, which is why I'm really thrilled about your invitation to participate, Kimberly. I appreciate it.
And your thorough background is one of the reasons that I'm so glad you agreed and accepted the invitation. Okay, Peter, our segment now is, when did you know you were a color? Share with us the first moments that you recognized ethnicity exists in America.
That is such a great question. And as I said in my introduction, when I was in college, I participated in that urban semester program where they took 8 students, 7 of us were white. There was 1 black young woman, 4 young men, 4 young women, and plopped us in the inner city of Hartford. And each of us worked in a different social service agency, right in the inner city of Hartford. And I remember, I don't know, about 2 weeks into the job I was assigned to, which was a fascinating youth program run by a kind of a traveling minister, Reverend Herbert T. Smith. He was a real character and just a wonderful person. And I remember, walking to work every day, and then all of a sudden, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, I looked down at my hands and I said, oh my goodness, I'm white. And I swear it's the first time I had that recollection. So here I was about 18, 19 years old. And I never had to think about it. It's one of the privileges of being white, Kimberly, is that we white folks, we do not have to think about race. It's one of the main privileges that we have. We can choose not to think about it. I can live in my white world, go to my white job, my white family, my white friends, and I can choose not to think about race, other than, what comes in about on the news and everything. It has to be a conscious effort. That's one of the privileges. I mean, as you well know, if you're a person of color, if you're a black person in America, you don't have that privilege. You are dealing with race and racism every day of your life. So that was the moment. It was really amazing. I'll never forget. I looked down. I'm white. And it's because I was immersed in the inner city meaning it was the black community. And wow, I'm white. First time.
Was that a wonderful wow? Like, wow, I'm white, like, wow.
Like an amazing wow. It was like like, wow, how come I never realized it? How come I never thought about it? Because we were really immersed. I mean, I was working in a you know, kind of a social service youth program in the inner city, and dealing with teenagers, and just like every other teenager, but it was in the inner city, and they were all Black, and the people I worked for were Black. It was just a realization, and it was like, wow, how come I never thought of that? And it began to, you know, that was my beginning of my journey into what race and racism is in America. I mean, I was, you know, raised liberal, progressive, however you want to call it, and but I lived in a lily white community, and so it took a while to really open up to it, and that's what started me in the process. And I've been on that journey ever since, you know, on again, off again, because again, I have my privilege. I can choose not to do my work about undoing racism. I can choose to, you know, go back to my white landia experience, right? So it's a choice. It's a choice white people can make, need to make, I think should make. But that's my journey. You know, I can't learn enough. I got to catch up.
So what we're going to talk about right now are some terms. And Peter, you brought up some terms that I think would be really interesting to find out how you feel about them, being a white gentleman and a person who is very much involved in undoing racism. So the term that you used is people of color. How comfortable are you using the term people of color, and what does the term really mean to you? Maybe not, I mean, you can share what it means, you know, in the dictionary definition of it, but what does it mean for you?
Right. That's a great question, because terminology, language is so important to understanding race and racism in America. If you've lived for any length of time, as I have, you've seen it. I've seen a change in the terminology. I mean, when I was growing up, the term for people of color was colored people. The term for Black people was colored people. If you think about it, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, that was the term of the day, right? And then it's evolved. It became, I don't know which came first, African American or Black, you know, Black Power movement. I'm proud and I'm Black. Language has changed as the movement has changed, and so you got to kind of keep up with it. Particularly white people need to listen, need to take the leadership from people of color, particularly Black people, on what is appropriate, what is right, what is respectful. And it does change. In fact, I was on a call, because I participated in a weekly call with activist people who are really into undoing racism in their communities and in themselves. And a Black woman, one of the leaders in our community here in Nyack, New York, talked about that, saying, don't call me a person of color, call me Black. And I was kind of taken back because, you know, I'm just getting kind of used to in the last few years using the phrase people of color. But we have to be sensitive to what the oppressed group wants to be called. In this case, we're talking about racism, so what particularly Black people want to be called. So it's a constantly evolving process. Until we get to true equality, we're going to have these struggles, and language is part of it. You know, a new term, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I don't know if this is the same term you were going to come up with, but yes. The term for you is BIPOC, B-I-P-O-C. I know that you are familiar with this term, so I'm going to ask that you share the meaning of the word with the audience, and again, some more information about how you see this term, how it's evolved into this term.
Yeah, that's perfect, because that's an example of how language has evolved right to this moment. That's a new one. At least it's new to me. Maybe 4 weeks ago, I heard it on one of the calls. We were challenging each other to learn and grow about racism and what to do about it. And one of the leaders talked about BIPOC, and everybody said, well, what is that? And it's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. People, you know, it means people, and it's supposed to be all encompassing of all what you could, another term that's used, sometimes it's not liked, but, you know, marginalized people or oppressed people based on race. So that covers everything. Black, indigenous, and people of color is what BIPOC is. And I think it's a great new term that we need to become familiar with.
Let me ask you, you say you think it's a great new term. I'm, along with you, have been writing a book on race and ethnicity now in manuscript version. I'm two chapters from completing it. Hopefully I don't want to write more. And I don't have BIPOC in that at all. And so that's a new terminology that I'm going to have to put in there now, because like you said, it just came to me fairly recently too. But I don't know my comfortability yet with it, because I don't know how it feels to have a conversation with just general, regular, everyday people and say, well, the BIPOC people, BIPOC, as opposed to just saying, people of color, or like you say, those who feel discriminated against, having that firm term. So what about you? Do you feel like that's something that you can use in everyday language and to express to people what it means, or that it may stay in maybe academia?
Again, it's a great point, because as the language changes, it becomes more, it's almost counterproductive in a way, because it's said, because it's like those who know, and those who don't. So it almost separates people. Because if you use BIPOC, I think you're right not to use it right now in your book. Depends when your book's going to come out. Because language, I'm married to a speech pathologist, so I know the importance of language. She teaches me that all the time. And, language should be used to really communicate, really connect with, really build, your circle. Sometimes language, like language in academia, you mentioned, or social services or healthcare, they have all these acronyms and all these phrases. Sometimes it just separates people. Mm-hmm. If you use it, well, I know and you don't know. There's a term that just drives me nuts. I don't know what you think about it. The idea of woke. Woke.
Yes.
I hate it. Because to me, what it says is I'm woke and you're not.
Although we have to think maybe it's an in-group, out-group type of.
Exactly.
And being told, if a person of the in-group tells a person of the out-group, you're not woke, that's negative. But if we're saying you're woke, then it brings the person into the group, right? So it's like anything. I think if you use it in a positive way, then it's encompassing and it's, it can be positive. But if you use it like any other term, I suppose, and throw it out in a negative way, then it really marginalizes other people and pushes them away. And now it shows disrespect to their learning. I mean, like you said, you didn't have to know that you were white until you were well into your teens. And so if a person has to wait that long to get woke and they're being told they're not woke very early on, they may then decide, well, I don't want to be part of that group because that's, they don't like me. They don't want to bring me in. And, that's part of my children's book that I write, that, you have to feel good about yourself, but you also have to then share that, feeling of inclusivity with other people. Otherwise, like bring everyone into your group.
Right. That reminds me, there's a group that I'm involved with. I think you're probably aware of them, A Call to Men. Are you familiar with them?
No,
we'll have to talk about that. It's a great group. They're mostly, their core is about sexism, male supremacy, ending violence, male violence against women and girls, but they're also very steeped in anti-oppression work, as in race and racism as well. They handle all the oppressions, but they have a phrase that I love. It's called, instead of calling someone out, you're calling them in. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a word, there's a saying for it. Yay. Say that one more time. Instead of, what is it? Can you repeat that?
Oh, sure. Instead of, sometimes groups and people, we call people out, we confront them, we call them out on their stuff, whatever that is. In this case, it would be on their racism or their, lack of sensitivity. But instead of calling people out, we need to actually call them in.
I love this.
And by that, I take that to mean you're bringing it up, oh, my brother, you're acting, what you said was really prejudicial. It was racist, but you do it in a way of pointing it out to say, look, there's another way to say what you said. Just be sensitive, so you're, instead of just confronting, you're out of here, you're out, you're the other. So I love that phrase. That's a new one to me.
I love that phrase. Okay, Peter, I'm getting ready to call you in.
I'm ready.
So you're my, I don't know if we should say guinea pig, but the term N-word. There are people within the in-group, Black people, who would like to say the word nigger. Others refuse to accept that and said it needs to be gone. Others, they don't even like to hear it. The very fact that I uttered it could be detrimental in some cases, but this is a talk show, so I'm going to talk. I'm going to put it out there. And then we got to the point where N-word has a meaning in itself. We can take it. And I actually haven't heard that word in my circles. However, still in music, you hear it. And so I think there's for me, because that's what, we're having real race talks here, so that I feel it's okay for me. I grew up with it. It brings me back to this period where I understand being an in-group that it's familiar. But I had an opportunity to spend time with a white older gentleman, much older than you.
That's impossible.
Well, at the time, he is now definitely older than you, but maybe he was your age at the time. I don't know. It was about 7 to 10 years ago. I want to say about 7 years ago. And I would just stand there and talk to him. And one of the things that he would ask me is, why is it bad for him not to be able to say the N-word when he was called brother? He had Black male friends in Atlanta. When they were younger, they would hang out. And he was part of their group. So he doesn't understand why now all of a sudden he's not able to utter the word. What would be a good way to respond to that? Because I think you feel strongly about it. I saw your look when I mentioned it.
I do, and I'll explain why, but he was a white man, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And from the generation where he's growing up in the 60s. And so him being, having a camaraderie with other Black young men made him feel like he was part of the in crowd. And while he was with them, he was. But, people grow up and they move apart. And so he's wondering, why is a person like him, who was very comfortable using the word with others, now somehow can't use it?
See, a little bit about me, my personal background. I cannot even utter the word. I cannot. I don't know if I've ever said it. I mean, I must have said it in a discussion like this, but I can't remember it. When I was a kid, I told you I was raised by liberal parents. Mm-hmm. We were not allowed to say that word, ever, ever. Yet, my parents, particularly my mother, my dear mother who's no longer with us, was really quite racist. Mm. Deeply racist.
Wow.
And
how did you find that out?
Excuse me?
How did you find that out? Because you were saying how
here's how it
you know about being white until you were in your teens.
Right. So that thing about me discovering whiteness, it was really kind of looking and realizing. I mean, I had an awareness of race issues growing up, but it was really looking, oh my God, I am white.
You know what white meant.
Right.
That you had this privilege. Maybe.
And growing up, under this liberal, umbrella, my mother would watch TV. And there were a lot of variety shows at that time, because I too grew up in the 60s. And somebody like Nat King Cole was on. He had a network show. You could look it up. It was like a 15-minute show.
Nat King Cole.
Nat King Cole.
I think I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Magnificent singer, one of the best singers of his time or any time. Anyhow, so she's watching and then commenting on his looks. Or Ella Fitzgerald will come on Andy, I can't remember it. Whatever, one of the.
Not Andy Rooney.
No, one of the variety shows. Andy Williams, was that his name? Anyhow.
No, it wasn't Andy Williams.
Okay, so and she would come on, one of the greatest singers of all time, right? Of all time. And my mother would be commenting, oh, look at her hair, look at how she's sweating. My mother dripping with racist comments. And I knew it as a kid that, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Look, I don't want to get so deeply into that, but here, so you had two things going on. Liberal, causes, and everybody should be equal, yet deeply rooted racism. And to me, that's my personal experience. Every white person in America has something like that, I strongly believe. You cannot be socialized or raised in America without and be white and not have racism deeply rooted, deeply embedded in you. Even if your parenting was extremely, liberal and equality for all of that, even more so than my parents. Let's say my mother really didn't make those comments, but I'd walk out of the house and I'd see billboards and I'd see movies and I'd see TV and I'd read books and newspapers and I'd be or the news on TV. What did I grow up seeing? If I saw a black person, it was a mugshot, somebody being arrested. Did they show the black woman scientist who was discovering things? No. I mean, Nat King Cole is a great documentary. You could look it up about his life because he really was a phenomenal performer. And he was recognized. He traveled America. He couldn't stay in the hotels he performed in.
Right. Exactly.
And here he is on network TV, and he was discriminated against and treated horribly. And, I don't have to tell you.
You grew up in a northern town, a northern state?
Northern New Jersey.
What kind of city was it?
I grew up in a suburb of New York. My parents, kind of escaped Staten Island. Not that
I thought you were going to say something in the South.
No. My parents were immigrants, from Germany and Russia, both sides of my family. And so they came here with nothing. And they came to the Lower East Side of New York. Then they went to Staten Island for some reason. And then my father and my mother, I teasingly tell my cousins who still live in Staten Island that we escaped. And we went to what was the new suburbia, USA. It was suburban growth. So we moved to a community within the town of Fair Lawn, New Jersey, and that's where I grew up. And it bordered. See, this is some of my awareness of race, even if I wasn't that conscious of it. Mm-hmm. It was a lily white town bordering. You've heard of Paterson, New Jersey?
Yes.
Now, Paterson, New Jersey was one of the small cities that erupted in the 60s with riots. It almost burned down. And there was like we talk a lot about walls now in our society, building walls. It was as if there was a wall built between Paterson and Fair Lawn. It was actually a river. The Passaic River separated it. But
so they talk about being on the other side of the tracks, but in this
absolutely. And it was a Black and Latino community at that time. And we would go there maybe to go to a movie, but there was never mixing. Black families that were making money and wanted to buy a house in suburbia, they weren't allowed to come to Fair Lawn. And it was like you could walk to Fair Lawn. They weren't allowed in.
And you didn't know this as a child, though, right? You just for some reason didn't know why you were lily white. You didn't really know.
I had the question mark, in my head, a little, but I didn't have to deal with it because I just went back to my white friends, my white school, my white family, my white sports. I had a coach, a teacher, and a coach in Fair Lawn. It's a whole other subject. I won't get into it because he ended up to be a very famous NBA coach. Oh. But he was in our little high school, okay? And he was aggressive. He was young, and he organized a group of us it was called the Key Club. It was a part of the Kiwanis, where you do community service. And he came to us and he recruited us white kids to go to try to get approval to kind of import a couple of Black basketball players to play on Patterson. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
It had nothing to do with equality. It had nothing to do. He wanted a couple of basketball players, right? And he used us to do that. It was interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Well, let me ask you, how did you feel like during that time? Like, did you feel like did you feel it was heavy? The subject was heavy, or it was just still, because you're talking about that part, like it was kind of light and kind of fun. But when did it become, or did it become heavy to you? Is it even heavy now, or is it just something that you're very involved in and feel passionate about?
That is such a great observation. It's really true, because I was talking about it kind of lightly, and that comes from my whiteness. I could be light about it because I can remember an anecdote like that and go back to my friends and my family and not have to think about it. But, in the 60s, things were erupting. Civil rights movement was very strong. 1960, you asked that question. I would love to be able to go back and say, what did Pete think of then? What was I really experiencing?
Now, who's Pete?
Me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see you as Peter.
I know. Well, I think of myself as a kid.
I love that. We have to ask our young selves things because we have beliefs when we're younger, right? That if we continue to honor that belief, we tend to overlook all the value that we can bring to our lives right now. It's like saying to that little boy, little girl, that little Pete or little Kim, in my case, it's okay to grow up. It's okay to have a different perspective. And it doesn't have to be in everything in your life. It could just be in this one thing and you can grow. I think some of us are scared to grow. Being, I think we mentioned the term woke, right? Being woke may in fact mean maybe denigrating some part of our existence. So that's a thought that you just made me think of, because to be open is to go back to see who you were, and how far you've come. And if you don't feel you are, then you can feel a little bit unhappy about that.
Maybe you and I will do a book together someday.
Bring it on.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. I wrote a book about my coaching practice, my life coaching practice.
Yes.
It's called How to Get Out of Your Own Way and Get On with It.
Do you have it with you?
I always have it with me.
Oh, I'll bring it up, put it up. Okay, well, let me give you the widescreen.
There it is. Well, here's my book, Get Out of Your Own Way and Get On with It, a practical guide to stop self-judgment and negative thinking. So it's about my coaching practice. The reason I bring that up is I have a little introduction in the book, because I believe that, we're all a product of everything we've ever experienced in life, every person we've ever met. It's all in there. So when you were talking about going back and, asking or almost putting your arm around little Kim or me around little Pete and listening and wondering, because it was all there. If we could unlock that. So my book is about coaching for anybody, how to look at the past, realize what you want to change, realize what's getting in your way, and putting it in the past and getting on with it. But I realized, and I mentioned it in the introduction of the book, I would love to take on this issue around issues of race and oppression. Because my book doesn't go into it, but I think that there's a whole topic there where maybe you and I can have a conversation and kind of uncover that. Because, I mentioned about people's environment. Well, if you're Black in America, if you're Latinx in America, if you're Native American in America, you're dealing with more than the personal family drama, trauma that you were raised with. You have the overlay of oppression that you have to deal with. I believe it can be dealt with on a personal level, even though my social justice work is about systemic, but I think we need to do both, is what I'm saying. So I'd love to talk to you about that.
Well, that's usually where I like to leave it, when there's more conversation to be had. I wanted to talk to you more, bringing up different terminologies, because you just mentioned a few more that I was like Latinx, but okay, we're gonna end right here, unfortunately. Actually, fortunately, because we're gonna meet up again, and we're going to definitely probably be engaged in some other programs and projects. And We can always come back to the forum here to Race Talks. Any last words?
I'm so thrilled you asked me. I'm thrilled to get to know you deeper. I want that to continue. Available anytime you want to have me on again or just to talk and explore. That's what we all need to do, and I'm really excited to do that together. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Peter Heymann, everyone, and make sure you get a copy of that book. And all I want to say right now is love, beauty, joy.